First up, my good friend who works at the ADF, Jeremiah Ighonabola. He is supporting Livia's story. You may remember we talked briefly about Livia before, but I'm going to get Jeremiah to talk us through her story and where she is at the moment. Hi, Jeremiah.
Hi, Governor. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. So tell us the background of Livia, because I think her case is less familiar than some of the other cases that ADF have been supporting. But she's another person who's been arrested outside of an abortion center for not doing anything wrong, isn't she?
Absolutely. So, well, m most people will be familiar with Adam's case, Adam Smith Connor, who was a man, army veteran who was charged for silently praying in relation to his unborn child outside the abortion facility. So we had a charge there for a man conversing with God. Uh, Livia's case was relating to a woman, a 63-year-old woman, who decided to offer a conversation with her fellow citizens. She stood near the abortion facility with a simple sign saying, "Here to talk if you want." And her reasoning for doing so was because in the aftermath of COVID, she realized that many people were lonely, many people really enjoyed having conversations, and she figured that the buffer zone didn't necessarily criminalize conversations. But little did she know that the fact that she was a known pro-lifer, even the mere offer of a conversation was to be criminalized as well.
Right. So the legislation talks about harassment and intimidation, right? It's trying to prevent vulnerable women from being harassed or intimidated. But we know from Adam Smith Connor's case that it was about disapproval, actually. And he showed disapproval by praying silently in his own head against abortion. And so there seems to be a gray area of whether it's harassment, intimidation, or disapproval. But it seems that Livia Tossici Bolt was doing neither of those things, and that she was offering, I think if we scroll down, we can see an image
Yes.
of her and the sign. She was just holding up a very friendly sign that said, "Here to talk if you want." If you want, for goodness sake, if you don't want, you just keep walking, right? There's no, I don't see that as intimidation. I don't see that as harassment, and I don't see that as disapproval. So what is the problem?
Well, it was very interesting in the two-day trial last week, where the prosecution seemed to emphasize the fact that she could be seen, not the fact that she was saying anything or doing anything, just the fact that she could be seen. So there's a footbridge near, about 1 minute away, and one of the lines of questioning from the prosecution, the KC that they employed, was, do you agree that you could be seen from the footbridge? And, one might wonder, what is the relevance of being seen
Yeah.
if this PSPO, Public Space Protection Order, was designed to prevent particular activities? But what we've noticed is that the line of argument from the other side is that if you're known to disapprove of abortion and you're seen anywhere within the buffer zone, then that law is designed to criminalize you. And of course, we argue that not only is that censorship 101 and extremely dangerous in terms of the slippery slope and the precedent that it could set, but two, that the PSPO doesn't mention anything to do with conversations being disallowed within what we should emphasize is a public space, not a private space, not private land. Many people say on Twitter that she was trespassing, or she had breached an injunction, or she had breach some other kind of particular order. No, this is a public space. Other people were present. Livia was present, just like any other member of the public was allowed to be present. And she offered a conversation. Many people indeed did stop to have a conversation with Livia. And, the conversations were so lovely that one of them actually invited her home for tea. So what we're seeing here is actually what I would consider to be one of the most greatest attacks on freedom of speech itself, because if you criminalize the ability of two individuals to engage in a consensual conversation in the public space, just because you believe one of the individuals has viewpoints that go against the mainstream perspective, then what's next? Today it's pro-life views, tomorrow it can be gender critical views, and next, in a couple of years, it could be views that the proponents that are against Livia hold dearly themselves. So in a free and democratic society, we should be protecting all perspectives, especially when presented so peacefully and so benignly as Livia did.
This is terrifying to me because they seem to shift the goalpost. I remember in Adam's case, he wasn't visible. I think he was stood behind a tree, so it wasn't the fact he wasn't seen.
Well, they focused in part on his shoulder being seen from the back.
I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. And the fact that they're saying, "Oh, well, Livia is seen," again, it's not about the actions. Therefore, it's not about the PSPO legislation. It's actually about who she is. This is political persecution because they know who she is and what she believes. And actually, it's what she believes that they dislike, and they're trying to legislate against what someone thinks. This is thought crime. This is 1984. But I think you raised a very important point when you said some people on Twitter think that she was banned or she was trespassing or she's breaking an injunction. And these are common misconceptions. I wanted to raise this very briefly because the public space protection orders are vast swathes of land, geographic areas around abortion centers where no one can harass, intimidate, or be seen to be disapproving of abortion. And it's not about individuals being banned. It's not about individuals having injunctions against them. It's a broad legislation that affects all of us. And I don't think as many people as should be are aware of that. And how can we fight back against that? Obviously, prior to 2003, there were like 5 councils that had these PSPOs. Now they've been rolled out across the whole country. What can we do? Like if I'm in my cassock walking through a neighborhood which happens to have an abortion center, and I happen to walk through a PSPO, and I'm Father Calvin Robinson, who's pro-life and clearly disapproving of abortion, am I going to get arrested just for being there?
Well, I'm afraid to say I don't know, and which is a very dangerous state of affairs. Well, if you recall, there was a case of Father Sean, who simply was present within the buffer zone, and he was charged with, well, silently praying, as we know, but he was also charged, more concerningly, in my view, for having a bumper sticker, which said "Unborn lives matter." And when you consider that there's no possible way in which that could be considered to be deliberately provocative. He's just going about his everyday life. He was parked near a church, and he was charged for just having a bumper sticker in his car. Others complained about the fact that he looks like a priest. So going to your question, you may well be criminalized for, even looking like a priest within the buffer zone, because they may read some intent into your presence. Then we had, as you know, and I'm grateful to you for covering her case, Isabel Vaughan-Spruce. It started off with silent prayer, but recently they've said her mere presence, the fact that she's a known pro-lifer, is the issue itself. So going to your question, how do we help in relation to this issue? Well, I think when unjust laws are made, there's 2 ways in which they can be essentially tackled. The first is you look to support those who have the moral courage to say, I'm going to continue doing what I know to be right. And I think we find that in Isabel, in Adam, in Livia, and in the Scottish lady Rose, who was recently arrested for something quite similar to Livia. And we rally around these people because, as far as I'm concerned, in my professional career, I've never worked with as inspiring a group of people as all of these people. They are fantastic. They are genuine. They are not provocative. They have been doing this work that nobody else wants to do for many years. And supporting them is the one thing I think ought to be done, because they are leading the charge for freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and essentially the right to engage with God and with other people. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, when you consider what's going on the legal landscape here, what's happened to the right to freedom of speech? The right to freedom of speech, we have jurisprudence saying that it's the bedrock of our society. We have jurisprudence saying that the right to assemble with others, apart from where there's an incitement to violence, must be protected as one of the highest and most precious of rights in a democratic society. So why do those rights seem to have no effect in these cases? The reason for that is because of the ever-increasing intractable right of privacy, which seems to have grown uncontrollable status, where it needs to be, according to many of the judges, balanced against freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and so on and so forth. But actually, we need legislation that sets freedom of speech apart as a right, a qualified right that needs to take priority over and above the other rights in a democratic society. As you know, we don't have a written constitution here in the UK. You do where you are in the States. But of course, I think we need, given the free speech crisis in the UK, we do need to get to the place where freedom of speech is recognized as the bedrock of society, not only in common parlance, but actually in concrete law that sets it apart from other legislation.
Thank you for watching my Common Sense Crusade. If you'd like to watch the whole show, you can subscribe to lotuseaters.com for as little as £5 per month, and then you get access to a bank of content as well. My show is 3 p.m. every Thursday. See you there. Deus Vult.